The car was sinking, but Michael was smiling. Cold water invaded the luxury sedan while the Hudson River swallowed the CEO who had just lost everything. The metallic taste of blood mingled with the smell of soaked Italian leather, while memories of broken promises to his 9-year-old daughter burned brighter than the air escaping her lung. His empire of lies had collapsed in a single day, but it was the lost piano recital that had made him drive blindly through the storm. "Please, God," he whispered for the first time in decades, "give me another chance." Darkness enveloped him, but what awaited Michael was not death, but a mysterious old man on an island that didn't exist on any map. The New York sky darkened in seconds. Michael Donovan watched from the window of his 47th floor office as black clouds engulfed the skyscraper. At 38, he had everything money could buy. CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the country, Manhattan Mansion, luxury cars, private jets. But that Friday afternoon, as the storm was brewing, something inside him was stirring as well. The phone rang. It was Sarah, his assistant. "Mr. Donovan, your wife called again. Said you missed your daughter's piano recital for the 3rd time this month." Michael closed his eyes. Emma was only 9 years old. He had promised that he would be there. "Tell her I'll make up for it over the weekend." "Sir, she mentioned that you said that in the last 4 weeks." The silence weighed down. Michael hung up without answering and returned to face the storm. His cell phone vibrated with a notification. The company's stock had plummeted 40% after complaints of accounting fraud. His world was falling apart. That night, driving through pouring rain across the George Washington Bridge, Michael couldn't stop thinking about how he had gotten to this point. The poor boy from Brooklyn who had vowed never to be like his alcoholic father was now exactly what he had sworn to fight: absent, obsessed with work, missing the moments that really mattered. A flash, a bang, a sharp detour to avoid a truck. The guardrail did not resist. The car spun in the air as if in slow motion. Michael watched his life flash before his eyes as the vehicle plunged into the dark, icy waters of the Hudson River. "Please, God," he whispered for the first time in decades, "give me another chance." The water invaded the car. Everything went dark. Are you enjoying this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the sequel. Leave your like to help me reach more people with this message of hope. Michael opened his eyes to a cobalt blue sky. He felt sand under his finger and the sound of waves crashing gently. Was he alive? Dead? He sat confused, looking around. A deserted beach stretched for miles, with a dense rainforest in front of it. "Impossible," he muttered, getting up with difficulty. His expensive clothes were torn. His Rolex watch was still working, showing 7:43 in the morning. But where was it? How had he survived the fall? He checked his pocket. Soaked wallet, dead cell phone, car keys. He laughed bitterly. What good was all this now? After hours of exploring the beach without finding signs of civilization, Michael decided to go into the forest. The heat was stifling, the sounds of the jungle completely alien to someone who had spent his life among skyscrapers. Every step was a challenge for his now ruined Italian leather shoe. At dusk, exhausted and dehydrated, Michael stumbled into a small clearing. He tried to improvise a shelter with fallen branches, but failed miserably. He had never had to build anything with his own hands. He had always paid for others to do for him. Night fell quickly, bringing an unexpected cold. Huddled under a tree, Michael shivered, both cold and afraid. The sounds of the jungle intensified. Distant roar, cries of nocturnal birds, the rustling of leaves indicating creatures on the move. "Emma," she whispered, thinking of her daughter. "Forgive me for not being there." That's when he heard footsteps approaching. He froze in terror. A figure emerged from the shadows, an elderly man, tanned and wrinkled by the sun, white hair and piercing blue eyes. He wore simple clothes, carried a handmade lantern and a wooden staff. "I've been waiting for you, Michael," said the old man in perfect English, holding out his hand. "My name is Joseph. Come, you need shelter and food." Michael hesitated. "How do you know my name?" "Where are we?" Joseph smiled. "Let's say this place finds those who need to be found. As for where we are, that depends on what you need to learn." Joseph guided Michael down a steep trail that wound up the mountain. At every turn, the executive felt his muscles protest. Years of meetings in conference rooms had not prepared him for this. How much is left?" he panted after an hour of walking. "The journey is part of learning," Joseph replied cryptically. "You've spent your whole life running to get places, Michael." He never appreciated the path. Finally, they arrived at a small wooden cabin overlooking the ocean. Simple but cozy, with a well-kept vegetable garden, a few chickens and a goat. A column of smoke rose from from the chimney. "Welcome to my home," Joseph said. The interior was surprisingly comfortable. Handmade rustic furniture, shelves with old books, a burning fireplace. On the walls, black and white photographs of people from different times and places. Joseph served a hot broth and homemade bread. Michael devoured it all, realizing that nothing so simple had ever seemed so delicious to him. "You must be wondering if you're dead," Joseph said, sitting down in front of him. "Am I?" "Not exactly. Let's say you're between worlds. This place exists for people like you." "People like me?" "Lost souls who need to find their way back." Michael laughed nervously. "Look, I appreciate the help, but I need to go back to New York. I have a company to manage." A family that barely sees? A company built on lies?" Joseph asked softly. "What do you really have, Michael?" The words hit him like a punch. Unexpected tears welled up in his eyes. "I don't know how to get back," he finally admitted. "Nobody knows at first," Joseph replied. "But there is a way. There always is." Are you enjoying the story? Leave your comments saying what you think will happen to Michael. Don't forget to turn on notifications to be notified when the continuation is posted. The following days were a culture shock for Michael. Waking up at sunrise, fetching water from the well, feeding the animals, working in the garden, tasks he had never imagined doing. "Why is there no electricity or plumbing?" he asked on the third day, with blisters on his hands from working so hard. Joseph smiled. "I have everything I need. The question is, what do you really need, Michael?" At night, sitting by candlelight, Joseph would tell story. It was about people who had been there before. A banker who had lost everything in the Great Depression, a nurse traumatized by World War II, and 1980s executive addicted to cocaine. "They were all lost like you," he explained. "Everyone found their way back." "Who are you really?" Michael asked one night. "An angel? A spiritual guide?" Joseph laughed. "Just someone who has been lost and found his way. Now I help others to do the same." In the second week, during a walk through the woods, Joseph stopped abruptly. "See that fallen tree?" He pointed to a huge log blocking the way. "We need to remove it so that the way is clear." Michael looked incredulous. "It's impossible. It must weigh tons." "Nothing is impossible when you have faith and purpose," Joseph replied. "Start by moving what you can." For days, Michael worked on the log, cutting pieces with an axe, dragging them out of the way. Each night he came back exhausted, in pain he had never felt before. But strangely, he slept better than he had ever slept on his luxury mattress in Manhattan. On the seventh day, when he removed the last piece, he felt a satisfaction that no business acquisition had ever provided. "See," said Joseph, "the impossible becomes possible when we face one obstacle at a time, with persistence." Michael looked down at his calloused hand. "I've never built anything with my own hands before." "That's why he never really valued what he had," Joseph replied. "We value what we build, not what we simply acquire." A month passed. Michael no longer looked anything like the Wall Street executive. His skin has tanned, his muscles have strengthened, his beard has grown. More importantly, something in his eyes had changed. One morning, Joseph took him to a waterfall hidden in the wood. The crystal clear water fell into a natural pool of turquoise waters. "This is the mirror of truth," Joseph explained. "Look at your reflection, and you will see not only who you are now, but who you have been." Hesitantly, Michael approached the water. As he looked at his reflection, something extraordinary happened. Not only did he see his current face, but images of his life played like a movie. The scared boy hiding in the closet, while his drunk father yelled at his mother. The ambitious young man swearing never to be poor again. The businessman cutting ethics and relationships in the name of success. The absent father missing his daughter's first steps, her school presentations, her birthday. And then he saw Emma, alone at the piano, looking at the empty chair where he should have been. Michael fell to his knees, sobbing. "I've become my father," he murmured through tears. "I swore it would be different, but I'm just like him." Joseph put his hand on her shoulder. "Recognizing this is the first step towards change. Your father never had that clarity. It's too late." Michael shook his head. "I lost everything." "It is never too late for divine goodness to work in your life," Joseph replied. "As long as there is life, there is hope for a new beginning." Are you following this journey of transformation? Leave your like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Sign up so you don't miss the next chapter of this inspiring story. 3 months had completely transformed Michael Donovan. Her hands, once soft and cared for by weekly manicures, now sported hardened calluses and small scars, badges of honor from her daily work. Her skin, previously pale pale from the endless hours in air-conditioned meeting rooms had taken on a healthy, tanned hue. Even his posture had changed. His body, once hunched over smartphones and laptops, now moved with the natural grace of someone who had learned to carry firewood, climb slopes, and navigate narrow trails. The mountain had become his new office. He knew each trail as he had once known the halls of his corporate skyscraper. The eastern trail that led to the crystal-clear creek where trout swam carefree. The winding path from the west that culminated in a panoramic view of the distant ocean. The dangerous northern passage where loose rocks required total concentration at every step. The garden was his new empire, where he ruled not with memoranda and veiled threats, but with patience and respect for natural cycle. The tomatoes that needed cuttings to grow strong, the herbs that thrived in partial shade, the potatoes that hid in the dark earth like closely guarded secret. At night, lying on the rustic porch, Michael gazed at the starry sky with a rediscovered childlike wonder. In Manhattan, the stars were just abstract concepts, obscured by light pollution and the frenetic pace that never allowed you to look up. Here, he had learned to identify constellations, to notice the slow movement of the planets, to predict climate change by the pattern of night clouds. Most important of all, he had learned to listen, not just the outside sound, but the inner voice he had suffocated with ambition and materialism for decades. On that particular afternoon, with impeccably blue skies, Michael worked alongside Joseph on the roof of the cabin. They replaced some wooden tiles damaged by the recent rains, a meticulous job that required precision and patience. Michael hammered with confidence, feeling satisfaction in each perfectly aligned nail, a feeling no corporate acquisition had ever provided. It was then that he noticed the change in Joseph. The old man, normally serene and conversational, suddenly interrupted his story about ancient techniques of navigation through the stars. His whole body seemed to tense, like a wild animal sensing danger. His eyes, a deep blue that sometimes seemed to contain the ocean itself, fixed on the horizon with disturbing intensity. "A storm is coming," Joseph pronounced, his voice taking on a different quality, deeper, older somehow. Not an ordinary storm. Michael interrupted his work, placing the hammer on the new tile. He followed Joseph's gaze, peering into the perfectly clear horizon. The sky exhibited an almost painful blue in its perfection, without a single cloud visible in any direction. A gentle breeze swayed the tops of the tallest pine tree, bringing the scent of resin and wildflower. Birds sang nonchalantly. Nothing suggested any imminent atmospheric disturbance. "The sky is clear," Michael remarked, frowning. After months on the mountain, he had developed an almost superstitious respect for Joseph's intuition, which had predicted rain and wind with disconcerting accuracy. But this time, there were absolutely no visible signs of bad weather. Joseph turned to face him, and something in the depth of that gaze made Michael shudder involuntarily. It was as if the old man saw through him, through time, through reality itself. "Not all storms are visible from afar," Joseph replied, his calm voice contrasting with the intensity of his gaze. "Some are formed within us long before they manifest themselves in the outside world. Others arise so quickly that we only notice it when we are already at their center." He paused significantly, placing a wrinkled hand on Michael's shoulder. "This will be your final test, Michael. Be prepared." Joseph's hand weighed more than its size suggested, as if carrying the gravity of centuries. Michael felt a shiver run down his spine, not of fear, but of recognition. Something fundamental was about to change. They finished their work on the roof in contemplative silence, each immersed in their own thoughts. The sun began its descent on the horizon, painting the sky with dramatic shades of orange and red, colors too intense for an ordinary evening, as if nature itself were signaling that something extraordinary was approaching. During the simple dinner, fresh grilled fish with herbs from the garden, Joseph remained unusually silent, answering Michael's questions with monosyllables or small nods. The cabin, normally cozy with its crackling fireplace and oil lamps, seemed strangely oppressive that night, as if the wooden walls themselves were holding their breath. As he lay in his simple bed, a straw mattress topped with rough cotton sheets that that now seemed more comfortable than the 1,000-thread-count Egyptian sheets of his mansion. Michael couldn't find the sleep that normally demanded him quickly after days of intense physical labor. Joseph's words echoed in his mind like an unsettling mantra. This will be your final test. What did that test mean? Would you finally be ready to return? The idea provoked mixed feeling. Part of him longed to see Emma again, to feel her little arms around her neck, to hear her story, to watch a piano recital, this time really present, not just physically but emotionally. Another part feared a return to the world they had known, its temptation, its pitfalls, its illusions of importance. He rolled over in bed, watching through the small window the stars that seemed to pulsate with unusual intensity. The silence of the night was almost tangible, dense as velvet. Not even the usual nocturnal sounds of the forest, the chirping of owls, the rustling of small animals in the understory could be heard. It was as if all nature was in suspension, waiting. When sleep finally claimed him, it was a restless rest, populated by fragmented dreams. Emma playing the piano on a slowly flooding stage, Catherine reaching out to him across an ever-widening chasm, his old office turning into a glass cage that slowly filled with water. In every dream, Joseph watched. From a distance, his face simultaneously sad and hopeful. The roar that tore him from sleep did not belong to the realm of dream. It was primal, visceral, the sound of the earth itself being torn apart. Michael sat up abruptly, his heart hammering against his ribs. The whole hut vibrated, small objects falling from the shelves. The gray light of dawn filtered through the window, revealing dust particles dancing in the churning air. Without stopping to put on his boots, Michael ran outside, bare feet, feeling the cold, damp earth of dawn. What he saw froze his blood. Down the mountainside was a wall of grayish-brown water at least 4 meters high, a turbulent mass carrying uprooted trees, rocks, and debris. The roar was deafening now, an apocalyptic symphony of impending doom. The air smelled of wet earth, crushed vegetation, and the metallic odor that precedes catastrophe. A smell Michael instinctively recognized, even though he had never experienced it before. Joseph, the name came out as a desperate scream as Michael ran back to the cabin, his heart threatening to burst in his chest. He found the old man in the back room, methodically packing a few items into a worn-out leather bag. A small leather-bound book, a carved wooden flute, a silver medallion with indecipherable inscription. His movements were deliberate, precise, without the slightest trace of panic. He wore the same simple clothes as always, but somehow he looked different, taller, more substantial, as if an inner light illuminated him. "It's time, Michael," Joseph said, his calm voice contrasting absurdly with the growing chaos outside. "We have to get away." Michael gestured frantically to the window, where the wall of water was inexorably approaching. "The water will destroy everything!" The entire hut shook now, the wood groaning in protest against the vibrations transmitted by the ground. Small cascades of dust fell from the ceiling beams. Time was running out fast. Joseph finished closing his bag with the same methodical calmness, then looked straight into Michael's eye. At that moment, time seemed to slow down. The roar of the flood became a distant hum. In the deep blue of the old man's eyes, Michael glimpsed something beyond human comprehension, an ancient wisdom, an infinite compassion, and something more, an unwavering purpose. "We cannot flee," Joseph declared, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "There is a family in the village at the foot of the mountain, a mother, a father, 3 small children, and an elderly grandmother. They have no way of knowing about the flood. They have nowhere to run. We need to warn them." Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Village? What village? He never mentioned any village. The confusion was mixed with the growing panic. In 3 months of exploring the mountain, he had never seen any sign of human settlement beyond Joseph's hut. "There are many things you haven't seen yet, Michael," Joseph replied, his eyes never leaving Michael. "Many paths we have not traveled, many truths we have not discussed. This mountain holds more secrets than you could discover in several lifetimes." Joseph walked to the window, watching the impending destruction with the serenity of one who gazes at a sunset. "It's your choice," she said, turning back to Michael. "You can try to save yourself by climbing further up the mountain to the rocky plateau where the water will not reach, or it can help me save that family." The water approached with terrifying speed, swallowing centuries-old trees as if they were toothpicked. The sound was deafening now. Not just the roar of the water, but the crackling of logs being broken, the rumble of rocks colliding, the wail of the earth itself being violated. Michael mentally calculated there were no more than 5 minutes before the flood hit the cabin. His gaze moved quickly between two directions. The path that climbed the mountain even higher, steep but sure, leading to the rocky plateau that Joseph had mentioned, and the dangerous path that descended toward the valley, where there was supposed to be a village he had never seen. Self-preservation versus sacrifice. Certainty versus faith. The old Michael versus the new. In his mind's eye, he saw Emma's face, not as he had seen her last time, but as he imagined her now, sitting alone at the piano, staring at the empty chair where her father should have been. He saw all the times he had promised to be present and failed. Every time he had chosen himself over others. "Come on," he said finally, the decision crystallizing in his soul as a fundamental truth. "I will not leave anyone behind this time." Joseph nodded, a glint of approval in his eye. Without further words, they walked out of the hut, the old man moving with surprising agility for his apparent age. They took the trail down the mountain, not the gradual, safe path Michael knew, but a near vertical route that meandered dangerously down the slope. They were running against time and against enraged nature. The water roared behind them, closer and closer, like a primordial beast stalking its prey. The trail was treacherous, narrow, steep, with loose stones and exposed root. The rain that had caused the flooding in the higher parts of the mountain had turned the ground into slippery mud that gave way under his feet with every step. Michael slipped several times, his knees and palms soon covered in cuts and bruises. Each fall cost precious seconds. Each time he stood up, the wall of water seemed closer, his roar more deafening. The air became thicker with moisture and the smell of destruction. "We won't make it," he shouted to Joseph, who descended a few meters ahead of him with the agility of a man decades younger. "Faith, Michael," replied the old man, his voice somehow audible above the chaos. "Not just in me or something bigger, but in yourself. You're stronger than you think." Driven by those words, Michael found reserves of energy that he did not know he possessed. His muscles burned, his lungs burned, but he kept descending, one step after another, each movement a statement of purpose. Finally, after a particularly sharp bend in the trail, the valley opened up before them, and there it was, the little village Joseph had mentioned, a half-dozen simple cabins built in a style Michael didn't recognize, neither modern nor completely primitive. People moved between the structures, performing morning tasks. Children played in a small central courtyard. Smoke rose from the chimneys, carrying the aroma of fresh bread, a scene of bucolic peace about to be destroyed. "Run!" Michael screamed as hard as his exhausted lungs would allow, waving frantically. "Flood! Run upwards!" The distance was too great. People looked in his direction, confused, unable to understand the warning or the urgency. Michael kept running toward them, ignoring the searing pain in his muscles, his breath tearing through his throat. He gestured frantically, pointing backward, where the wall of water was already descending down the last stretch of the mountain, uprooting trees and throwing rocks ahead like deadly projectiles. Finally, someone in the village understood. A middle-aged man pointed to the mountain, shouting something Michael couldn't make out. Like a wave, panic spread. People ran in all directions, some grabbing children, others trying to collect belongings. "To the east!" shouted Joseph, pointing to a rocky rise a few hundred yards from the village. "Take everyone to those rocks!" Michael arrived at the first cabin, panting, just as its occupants were leaving in panic. "Over there," he directed, pointing to where Joseph had indicated. "Quick, don't take anything, just run!" The chaos was total. Screams, cries of children, the roar getting closer and closer to the flood. Michael would run from hut to hut, making sure everyone was leaving, directing them to safety. Joseph did the same on the other side of the small village, his thin figure moving with purpose and authority. It was then that a desperate scream cut through the air, even surpassing the roar of the water. My daughter is in the last hut." A young woman, dark hair disheveled by the wind, eyes wide with terror, pointed frantically to the farthest structure, a small hut partially hidden by trees at the opposite end of the village, dangerously close to the direct path of the flood. Without hesitation, without even thinking, Michael ran in the direction indicated. The water had already reached the first buildings in the village, destroying them as if they were made of paper. The sound was apocalyptic, wood shattering, rocks colliding colliding, the insatiable roar of water devouring everything in its path. Every second was precious. Each step could be the last. Michael ran like he had never run before, his lungs on fire, his legs shaking with exhaustion. He reached the hut and broke down the door with a shoulder blow. In the dark, smoky interior, he found a girl about Emma's age, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. She was huddled under a rustic table, hugging a small, worn-out stuffed animal, her eyes wide with terror, paralyzed with fear. His face, framed by golden curls, was a mask of absolute panic. For a disconcerting moment, Michael saw Emma in that child. The same vulnerability, the same implicit confidence that adults would keep her safe, a trust he had betrayed so many times. "Come!" he held out, his hand trying to soften his voice despite the urgency. "I'm going to get you out of here. Your mother is waiting." The girl hesitated only for a second before grabbing his hand. Michael took her in his arms, feeling her small body tremble against his chest. She was surprisingly light, fragile as a bird. "Hold on tight," he instructed, adjusting her in his arms. "Let's find your mother." When he left the cabin, the scenario was nightmarish. The water had swallowed half the village, advancing inexorably towards it. Debris floated in the raging current. Logs, furniture, personal belongings, fragments of lives destroyed in seconds. Michael ran toward the rocky ridge where the other villagers gathered, the girl clutching tightly in his arms. The water reached his ankles, icy and unforgiving, making every step difficult. Soon it reached his knees, the current pulling him, threatening to knock him down. "Don't look back," he whispered to the child who hid his face on his shoulder. "We're almost there." But with each step, the water rose, the current strengthened. His muscles, already exhausted from running down the mountain, protested in agony. His feet slipped on the sunken ground, each step a battle against raging nature. "We won't make it," Michael thought, feeling his legs weaken under the combined force of exhaustion and current. The rocky rise seemed impossibly distant now, the screams of the villagers drowned out by the roar of the water. It was then that he saw Joseph standing in front of him, standing on a small islet formed by rocks that still resisted the flood. The old man held out his staff, a gnarled wooden staff that Michael had never particularly noticed before, but which now seemed to shine with its own light against the sky darkened by catastrophe. "Here, Michael," Joseph called, his voice clear and strong despite the chaos around him. "You can do it! A few more steps!" With a last-ditch, superhuman effort, Michael charged toward the outstretched staff. The water now hit his waist, each step a struggle against the current that threatened to drag him along with the child in his arm. His fingers stretched out, almost touching the wood. A massive log, carried by the flood, suddenly appeared to his right, swirling in the turbulent water like a deadly missile. Michael saw it out of the corner of his eye, too late to turn away. At the last moment, he turned his body, protecting the girl with his back. The impact never came. Somehow, impossible, inexplicable, the trunk deviated as if repelled by an invisible force. Michael felt Joseph's fingers grip his wrist with surprising force, pulling him to the relative safety of the small rocky islet. Together, carrying the girl, they climbed the rest of the way to the elevation where the other villagers were already gathered, watching in horror the destruction of their homes and possessions. The girl's mother ran toward her, tears cutting trails on her muddy face. "Lily! Oh, my Lily!" She took the child from Michael's arms, embracing it with the protective ferocity that only a mother knows. Then she looked at Michael, her eyes overflowing with gratitude. "How can we say thank you? You risked your life for my daughter." Exhausted beyond comprehension, soaked to the bone, covered in mud and cuts, Michael found the strength to smile. Not the calculated smile of the manipulative CEO that he had been, but something genuine, born of a newfound truth. "No need to thank you," he replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Just promise that you'll always be there for her. That will never keep her waiting." The woman nodded solemnly, understanding something deeper in the words of that stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to save her daughter. Michael looked around, looking for Joseph to thank for his crucial help, but the old man had disappeared, as if he had never been there. The next few hours passed in a blur of frenzied activity. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving destruction in its wake. The small village was partially destroyed, 3 huts completely razed, the others damaged to varying degrees. Ruined crops, lost animals, personal belongings washed away, but no life had been lost. All 23 inhabitants of the village, Michael told them several times, marveling at the miracle, had survived. Now they worked together, with the resilience of people accustomed to hardship, to begin rebuilding. Michael worked alongside them until nightfall, ignoring their exhaustion, helping to recover what what could be saved, improvising temporary shelters, lighting fires to dry clothes and heat food. No one questioned his presence or Joseph's, as if two strangers showing up to warn of a flood was perfectly normal. As the sun began to set, tinting the sky with dramatic colors that contrasted cruelly with the devastation below, Michael said goodbye to the villagers. Little Lily ran to hug his legs before he left, offering him her precious stuffed animal as a thank you. Michael knelt down to stand at her height, kindly refusing the gift. "You're going to need him more than I do," he said, touching the girl's nose with his finger. "It helps to scare away nightmare." With his body aching and his mind filled with new perspectives, Michael climbed back up the mountain. The path was unrecognizable. Fallen trees, displaced rocks, new streams formed by the water still flowing. Several times he had to improvise detours, climb obstacles, cross newly formed current. When he finally reached the spot where Joseph's cabin should have been, he stopped, awestruck at what he saw. The hut was intact, completely intact, as if the flood had miraculously diverted it away. The small herb garden in front, the chickens in the side pen, the neatly arranged pile of firewood, everything exactly as they had left it that morning. Joseph was waiting for him on the porch, sitting in his usual rocking chair, calmly smoking his pipe. The smoke rose in lazy spirals against the starry sky that began to appear. How Michael gestured to the intact cabin, to the visible devastation all around, unable to formulate the full question. Joseph smiled, that enigmatic smile that always made Michael feel simultaneously comforted and intrigued. "You passed the test, Michael," said the old man, his voice gentle but firm. "He chose to risk his life for strangers without hesitation. He chose the difficult path when the easy was clearly available." "I couldn't leave them," Michael replied simply, the words coming out of the depths of his soul. It wasn't an elaborate explanation. It wasn't a complex justification. It was a fundamental truth, as simple and powerful as breathing itself. "Exactly," Joseph nodded, his eyes shining in the starlight. "You finally understood what really matters. Not power, not money, not status, but connection, pity, presence." Michael sat heavily on the porch step, exhaustion finally taking its toll. Every muscle in his body protested, every scratch and cut pulsed, but in his heart, he felt a peace he had never experienced before, not even in the most accomplishing moments of his former life. Joseph slowly rose from his chair, leaning on the same staff he had extended to Michael during the flood. He walked to the door of the cabin, then turned, motioning for Michael to follow him. Inside, lit by the low fire of the fireplace and some beeswax candles, Joseph made his way to the back of the cabin. He stopped before a wall that Michael would have sworn was solid, but now he saw a door he had never noticed before. A simple door of dark wood, unadorned apart from a small symbol carved in the center, something that vaguely resembled a star inside a circle. "It's time for you to come back," Joseph said, his wrinkled hand resting on the old doorknob. "To go back to New York?" Michael felt a tightness in his chest, half apprehension, half longing for your life, for your family, to be the man you now know you can be. Joseph looked at him deeply, as if he saw not only the Michael of the present, but all of his past and future versions simultaneously. "You came here to learn, and you learned. Now he must apply those lessons to the world he has abandoned." Michael felt a lump in his throat, mixed emotions fighting inside him. "Will I remember all this? From you? From this mountain? From the village?" Joseph smiled, not his usual enigmatic smile, but something softer, almost paternal. "What matters is not to remember every detail, but to live what you have learned. The memory of the mind may fail, but the memory of the soul remains." He paused significantly. "Divine goodness has given you a second chance, Michael. Use it well." With a fluid movement, Joseph turned the handle and opened the door. Instead of the darkness of the night or another room in the cabin, there was a light, intense, white, pulsating, but somehow unblinding. It was like looking into the sun's own heart, but without pain or discomfort. The light seemed to call Michael, to invite him, promising him something he couldn't name, but that his heart recognized. "Goodbye, my friend," Joseph said, his voice echoing strangely, as if coming simultaneously from very near and far away. "And remember, it's never too late to start over." Impulsively, Michael hugged the old man, surprised by the solidity of that apparently fragile body. He smelled Joseph's signature smell, a mixture of pipe tobacco, dried herb, and something older, more elemental. "Don't miss out on the continuation of this exciting journey. What will happen when Michael returns to his life? Subscribe now, leave your like, and turn on notifications to find out. The second part of this incredible story is now available on the channel.